Have you ever noticed when you get nervous, your hands suddenly go cold and sweaty and your stomach tightens up and your heart starts racing or your mind goes completely blank? Maybe somebody says something that catches you off guard and instantly you get angry. And maybe all you want to do is get out of the room. And maybe you freeze and can't think of anything to say, or maybe you find yourself agreeing with somebody just to stop the conflict, even though you don't actually agree with them. Then later, when everything has settled down, you sit there thinking, why did I react like that? And I know I wasn't actually in any danger. And the reason for this, well, it can happen because your body doesn't wait for you to logically work out whether something is safe before it starts responding. Your nervous system, well, it's constantly paying attention to what is happening around you. And when it detects something that it might be threatening, stressful, or overwhelming, it can start preparing you to protect yourself very, very quickly. So in this video, I want to explain why that happens and what is going inside your body and when it does and why people can react in very different ways. You have probably heard of the flight, fright, and freeze, but you might have not also heard people talk about the fawn and flop. So by the end of this video, I want you to have a much better understanding of what these reactions actually mean, and more importantly, how you can start recognizing what happens in your own body before things become overwhelming. Hi, I'm Alan. I'm a counselor based here in Cairns, and I work with people face-to-face and online across Australia. And if you're watching this and thinking that some of this sounds very familiar and you'd like some support, understanding your own patterns and learning how to manage your stress and overwhelm, well, you can find my counseling details below in the description, and you can have a look to see whether working with me might be a good fit for you. So let's look at exactly why your body does this in the first place. Your nervous system, well, it has one very, very important job, and that is to help you to keep yourself safe. Humans have always needed this ability to react quicker to danger. Thousands and thousands of years ago, if something dangerous was coming towards you and you didn't have time to stand there and thinking, through every single possible solution, you needed your body to react quickly enough to give you a chance of surviving. Well, we still have that same system today, even though most of those things that trigger it look very, very different. You might not be running from a wild animal, but your nervous system can still react to conflict, criticism or uncertainty, even embarrassment, rejection, public speaking, an argument, or somebody raising their voice, or that unexpected phone call. How often have you looked at your phone and went, "Oh, I don't know that number, I don't like it"? So thinking about something as simple as your boss walking up to you can really, and they're saying, "Can you come into my office? We need to talk." And before you even know what the conversation is, your stomach might drop and your heart might start racing, and suddenly you're going through everything you've done over the past week and wondering whether you've made a mistake or whether you're in trouble. Your boss, well, he might only want to simply talk to you about your next week's roster, but your nervous system doesn't necessarily know that yet. It's already picked up uncertainty and the possibility of something going wrong, so it starts preparing you before you even had any time to gather any information. This, honestly, is why you can logically know you're probably safe while your body is reacting as though something serious is happening. So when that stress response starts, you can feel it throughout your body. Your heart is beating faster and your breathing might change and your muscles can tighten and your hands can become sweaty. Your mouth might suddenly feel dry and your stomach can start feeling tight, unsettled, or even nauseous. At the same time, the way that you think can change. Sometimes people say that thinking part of the brain switches off during stress, but that isn't quite right. Your brain doesn't literally turn off. What can happen is that stress becomes intense and it becomes harder to do slower, more deliberate thinking than you normally rely on. You might struggle to find the right words and you might forget something you know perfectly well, and it can become harder to think through different options or make a decision. That is why you can always walk away from a stressful conversation 10 minutes later and think, "Oh, that's what I should have said." How often does that happen to you? Drop a comment below. Your brain didn't suddenly become smarter. Your nervous system had simply started settling down. And once the intensity has calmed down, it becomes easier to think clearly. And how your body tries to protect you can look very different depending on the situation. For some people, that response comes out as a fight. Sometimes that happens to you immediately. You feel yourself becoming angry, defensive. Your jaw tightens and your muscle tense, and you feel like we need to push back. And sometimes people experience this so often they start telling themselves, I'm just an angry person. But sometimes anger is sitting on top of something else. And you might have felt embarrassed, rejected, disrespected, frightened, or even controlled. And your nervous system responded by trying to protect you. And that doesn't mean aggressive behavior is automatically okay. Understanding why you're angry doesn't remove responsibility for what you do with that anger, but what it can do is help you understand the reaction instead of only judging yourself for having it. So instead of stopping at the why am I so angry, it can also sometimes be much more useful to ask yourself what has happened just before that anger appeared and what you felt you needed to protect yourself from. For somebody else, that response might be flight. Instead of wanting to confront what is happening, everybody inside you, not everybody, but everything inside you, wants you to get away from it. You might want to leave the room, cancel something, avoid a particular person, or put as much distance as possible between yourself and that particular situation. How often have you been you're going to go to a party and you know that somebody else is going to be there and you're like, I don't want to do this. So the interesting thing is avoidance that is often works really well in the short term. And if you're extremely anxious about going somewhere, normally you would cancel. And you may almost feel that immediate relief. Your nervous system realizes and learns that you've escaped the situation, and the uncomfortable feeling, it's gone. It's gone away. The problem is that if the situation wasn't actually dangerous, your brain can start learning what that avoiding it is and what has kept you safe. Well, the next time something similar happens, the urge to escape can become even stronger. And that is one of the ways anxiety can get caught out in the cycle. You feel anxious and you avoid the situation, and the anxiety comes down to your brain becoming even more convinced that the avoidance was necessary. And then there's freeze. And this is one of that people carry a lot of shame around. You might be in a stressful or frightening situation and suddenly everything stops. Your mind goes blank. Somebody asks you a question and you can't answer, and you know what you want to say to that person, but the words just doesn't come out. You might even know what you want to move away, but that moment you feel stuck, like your legs just no longer work. Later, once everything is over, you reply and you think, why didn't I say anything? Why didn't I just leave? Or why did I just stand there? But freezing can happen automatically, and it's not necessarily a conscious decision to do nothing. This becomes particularly important when we talk about trauma, because somebody freezing during a frightening experience doesn't mean they agreed with what's happening. It doesn't mean that they choose not to defend themselves or they choose not to leave. The nervous system may have responded in a way that made movement, speech, decision-making much harder in the moment. And for somebody who has spent years blaming themselves for what they did or didn't do during a frightening experience, understanding that can be incredibly important. And another term that you may have never heard is fawn. Fawn is a little bit different because it is more commonly used in trauma therapy rather than being in the same sort of biological category as fight, flight, or freezing. But the behavior people are trying to describe with this is something many people recognize. Instead of frightening with somebody or trying to escape, you are trying to keep them happy. You become agreeable. You apologize quickly and you try to work out what the other person wants from you. And you might even start putting their needs ahead of your own because keeping them happy feels safe rather than conflict. For somebody who has spent a long time around unpredictable people or difficult relationships, this is a way of responding may once have been very useful, and you learn from that. And if you could read somebody's mood quickly and stay out of trouble and stop that situation from escalating, that may have helped you feel safer. The difficulty is that these patterns don't always disappear when the situation changes. And years and years and years later, you might find it incredibly difficult to say no. You might feel guilty whenever you set a boundary. You might constantly wonder whether somebody is angry with you or you feel responsible for keeping everybody happy around you. That doesn't mean everyone who struggles with people pleasing has experienced trauma. It also doesn't mean that every time that you agree with somebody that you're having a survival response. It simply means that some people keeping others happy can become connected with feeling safe. And you might not always hear the word flop as well when people talk about survival responses. When researchers look at some of the more extreme forms of this response, they usually use specific terms such as tonic immobility or collapsed immobility. This is more of a simply freezing nervous system or briefly freezing. When somebody experiences something so overwhelming and it feels that there is no way to escape, they can sometimes experience a much stronger involuntary response where they feel unable to move or speak. They might feel weak, disconnected, or even almost completely unable to respond of what is happening around them. And again, this is an important thing to understand, that this isn't necessarily something that a person is choosing. It's important to recognize that. Their nervous system is responding automatically to something that feels overwhelming. Some people can also faint during severe stress, although fainting can happen for many medical reasons, so unexplained fainting should never automatically be assumed to be caused by anxiety or trauma. So now that we understand these responses, the obvious question is, what am I supposed to do with this? For me, this is where this information becomes useful. Most people don't notice what their nervous system is doing until after reaction has already taken over. They notice that the argument after they become angry. They notice the anxiety after they've cancelled. And they notice the freeze response after they've walked away and started replaying everything in their head. Then the judgment starts. I should have reacted like that. I should have handled it better. I should have said something. I should have walked away. But before you can change a pattern, you have to recognize that the pattern is starting. Instead of immediately asking yourself, what is wrong with me? Start becoming curious about what is happening in your body before the reaction gets really, really strong. Maybe the first thing is that you notice that your jaw tightening, your heart is racing, maybe your stomach drops. Maybe you suddenly feel like you need to leave, and maybe your mind is becoming foggy and you can't talk anymore. Those first few signs can tell you that your nervous system has started reacting. And the earlier that you recognize that, the more opportunity you have to work out what is happening, rather than realizing afterwards when the reaction has already taken over. And this is probably the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this video. You can know that you're safe and still feel unsafe at the same time. Your logical mind might understand exactly what is happening, but your nervous system can still be reacting to something that it believes that is threatening. That is also why telling somebody just to calm down, have we all heard that? Just calm down, doesn't always help very much. So if we could simply decide not to become anxious or overwhelmed, angry, triggered, most of us would have done that a long time ago. Emotional regulation isn't about forcing yourself not to feel anything. It's about becoming better at recognizing what's happening inside you and learning what helps your nervous system come back to that calm state. So next time you notice yourself becoming overwhelmed, you don't need to immediately fix everything. Start by noticing. That's really important. Start by noticing. Instead of thinking I'm losing control, you might simply recognize my body is having a stress response right now. And that might sound like a very small difference, but one of those statements is a judgment about you, and the other is an observation about what your body is doing. Once you can observe what is happening, you have a much better chance of working with it. And remember, none of these responses are personality types. You are not permanently a fight person, a flight person, a freeze person. You might become an angry one in situations, avoid another, freeze around a particular person, or become extremely accommodating somewhere else. The response can change depending on what is happening and who you are with and what your nervous system has learned from previous experiences. These words are not meant to put you into another box, but they're simply ways of helping you understand what might be happening when you feel threatened, overwhelmed, or even unsafe. The goal isn't to never experience stress again. The goal is to become better at recognizing your alarm system is going off and understanding what might have triggered it and learning what helps you respond rather than simply being carried along by the reaction. So if you've been recognizing yourself throughout this video and stress, overwhelm, and anger, shutdown, or past experiences are making every single day harder, counseling can be a place to start working through these patterns. I'm based in Cairns, and of course I offer telehealth services to anybody right around Australia. And I also work with people on the NDIS, whether it's self-managed, plan-managed, or agency-managed as well. I also understand how complicated the NDIS system is, and I feel why people need that support to actually make sense of everyday situations rather than just sounding good on paper. So you'll find all my details in the description below. And if you'd like to have a chat and see whether working with me might be the right fit for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.